Hey folks, this is Tolly and welcome to some more game dev. Don't have anything specifically planned for today. We are going to just kind of jump into it and work through some stuff. Hey, you who's about to click away on YouTube in the VOD. I hope you have a great day. So last time we finished up the skill tree and I really enjoyed kind of getting that finally working, and off stream I've done a little bit of work to kind of iron out some of the bugs so that we can kind of go between runs and keep things being saved. And I've also kind of managed some of the design data editing stuff so that that's working as well. So everything should be good, except there's still obviously more work to do, because there will always be more work to do. So when we take a look at this and kind of get an idea of where we're at, we come in here, we're still using old imagery for Ward from Era of Embers. Honestly, all this art is old, and Drixie and I have had some conversations about how we're going to update this. She's going to do some concepting, but in the meantime, this is what we got. The screens are mostly set up so that if I increase my my HP here, we can actually see, not effectively, but we can see that the stat has changed. So here the health bar is now 50%, or not fully all the way through, but we're still at 20 HP because when I increase my max HP, I'm not modifying the current HP. But we can see that that stat is being modified on the character. But none of these stats are really having any impact because magic, strength, defense, none of this stuff is being used in the calculations of our abilities right now. So we need to ideally today get that up and running so that we're actually using a damage formula instead of simple damage. I've mostly had simple damage testing for testing purposes because we really haven't had any progression. Let's pause this and turn on the in-game music. So when we come into this next zone here, when we hit an enemy, I think we do like 1, 3, and 5, depending on whether or not we're doing a light attack, a medium attack, or a shove. So that's kind of a light attack. If we shove them, we do 1. If we rush into them, it's 3, and then I need 2 pips in order to do a heavy attack, and that does 5. So those are kind of like base numbers that I've been playing with, but let's actually get it so that that is doing real damage as like a starting point today, I think, and then we can see that the stat increases should be doing something. And then beyond that, I'd like to get the skills equipping. So if we look at, actually, let's jump back in here again. And if we look at the skill tree, we may notice that we only have 1 skill equipped right now, which is like better attack or focused attack, whatever it is called in game, focused attack. But when we actually go into a run, the abilities that we have equipped are those 3 I was just using. We have like shove, light, and heavy as like the 3 abilities kind of equipped down here in this bottom right area. I'm gonna see if we can make enough room. Yeah. So these are these 3 skills. Those are currently baked directly into the character. So if we go to scene view and then click on this version of the character, essentially each of those abilities are being assigned to a specific button, and that's kind of hard coded into the prefab of this 3D player controller. I'd also like today to see if we can get it so that those are not... I guess it is this one. But I'd like to get it so that these are actually modified at scene build time, so that when we actually enter into a scene, we actually choose which ability goes in which of these buttons based off which ones you have equipped. How we're going to do that, I'm still figuring out, and we will do it live. But the core idea of I'd like to have abilities be reflective of what you actually own rather than just being hard-coded is like one of the things I'd like to fix. Thank you, Amorphous, for the 47 months, which is truly insane considering the fact that I don't even stream that often. What is that? What even is that? You're gonna derail me for half a second, but 47 divided by 12 is almost 4 years. And I do not think I've been streaming for that much time. had to jump through some hoops to get Twitch on the new PC. Now I'm here for about an hour. What I miss, mostly a recap of what you saw in the last stream, and a little bit of what we're planning to do today. So let's jump into that and just start building. So we're going to look at the abilities. So inside of the design data ability section, some of the way that this folder structure is built is starting to fall apart. Like, I think art makes sense and like scenes make sense for the content, but inside of here, I don't think I like this prefab folder that just has like the dungeon and the front end in it, especially considering some of the prefabs for the front end is also inside of the scripts folders. There's some stuff I'd like to clean up. But anyways, side tangent. If we take a look at the abilities and we take a look at, let's fix the sub effects. So in here we have a damage effect. We haven't really dug into this at all since I've started streaming again. But the ability system I'm pretty proud of. Maybe it's overcomplicated, maybe it's bad, maybe it's doing terrible things, but from a design standpoint, I really enjoy the way this works. So this is an effect. This effect is basically anything that can happen when you go to perform an ability. And this happens not at real time. Like if you see an animation play, that animation is not happening on this spot here. All of these effects are essentially just constructing sequences. And those sequences are created into here. Here's where we want to look. Let's bring this down a bit. Basically, when we apply and construct sequence, which is what happens when you perform an ability, we just come in here, given the target data and the already existing sequence steps, we just come in, make a new sequence step, and then we pass that into the list of sequence steps. And then when we see all the animations performed where the character does damage, there's an effect, there's a flash on the screen, all of these different things are just different sequence steps happening in sequential order. And the ability effects are essentially constructing that list of sequences that will play out. Don't really want to like go any deeper than that. That may not be enough to fully understand, but really when we see stuff like animation parameter hit, the main thing to know is that when this gets called, it's going to be telling something, in this case the target, to play its hit animation via a type of bool, and it's turning that bool on. When we do flash sprite, this is going to flash the target of this ability for 0.2 seconds with this flash color with this easing, which is how it like, you know, returns to normal essentially. Particle effect, ability effect is just going to spawn a particle effect and play that. Damage is what we care about. Right now we are doing a simple damage effect. We want to change this out. So we want to do a damage effect instead of the simple one. Now, this does have prototype damage built into it, which is 5. So we're going to need to change this. This is showing me there's a level deeper. We need to go not to the damage effect, but the hit effect. Okay. Okay. And then we're going to modify it here. So I have some parented prefabs that are like stacking on each other in order to make my life easier. So if I need to have this effect happen in multiple different abilities, I can reuse it. So if we swap this out here, and then we turn this off, and just to be sure, I'm going to drag it down so it doesn't get grabbed. I'm not sure if toggling this off is going to be good enough. The way my system works, it may still find this ability effect, but I don't want to fully delete it at this stage. So what does this need? This needs the damage as well as a conditional. So a effect can have property components, which is like, hey, I'm going to be modifying a component or property. I'm going to be modifying a property with this ID. So the damage effect is going to put in how much damage it's doing into a string map, essentially, to this value. And then this conditional property component is being put in here, and it's just checking to see whether or not this property hit is 1. And if it is, it will do this. Otherwise, if it's not, it won't do that effect. So really, this thing here is doing a hit property, and it is going to assign hit to some value, 1 or 0, based off whether or not we hit. And in fact, I think because we're using full type hit, this will always be 1. Ooh, unless we have an automatic miss. But this is essentially going to hit this, set this to 1 or 0, and then this effect, which is damage, cares about 1 or 0. Again, I'm glossing over a lot of stuff here. I'm not entirely expecting this to make a ton of sense, but just know that abilities are really cool. That's the takeaway. Allows me to construct stuff really quickly and modify it really easily, and just have it be really flexible and be able to augment and create new types of abilities, skills, whatever you want to call them, very quickly. So if we've done this correctly, there's a good chance we will do damage based off of our stats. Did 2, 2, 1. Okay, so our stats are really low to begin with. But we were seeing some variance of 1 or 2 damage. So I think that's because we probably have a starting amount of states or stats that are basically 1. Yeah, the enemies are all 1 across the board. And if we take a look at the player basic stats, which isn't going to be in here anymore because of some of the work we've been doing. It's now actually going to be inside of the unit state in here. So if we change this to, say, 10, 10, 10, and 10, this should start using my normal damage formulas. And we should see some variance of damage between, like, I would guess 10 to 20 when we do an attack. We need to get out of this scene because I don't want to walk through 2 or 3 different scenes every time we want to test damage. Let's go into Forest Room 2. I feel like I should do like a separate video on some of the ability stuff. Oh, that just that killed but did not show anything. Okay. That might make sense because enemies might be dying in 1 hit, but I would still expect us to show the hit reaction. Interesting. I would not anticipate that one-shotting an enemy would cause the text to not appear. Okay. Color me confused. For now, a simple fix would just be to give them a ton of health. Amorphous is on it in chat. Same thought, same idea. Let's pin these so that I can see where that went. AI. Let's give them a max HP of... They're starting with 15. Let's go up to 50. I don't want to go to 1,000 because I do want to see if I can actually, you know, kill them, but... Yep, 20. 19. And if we do a shove, only 1. Interesting. Oh, probably because shove doesn't use the same effect. Shove, not shiv. It has its own setup for damage, it looks like. Which is still using simple. Okay, cool. Easy fix. I'm curious to see if... Oh, no, this wouldn't do anything. I was going to say... I was going to say maybe this would do less damage, but no, because the prototype damage is entirely based off of this value here inside of the simple damage, that means that shove versus anything else isn't going to do anything. I also need to hook these two back up to the new one. That's important. But yeah, because the damage effect doesn't really take into account... the prototype values, these are all going to do the same damage. There we go. It will check power though. So it's gonna, so some of this stuff is a bit of math, but essentially it's going to figure out what our attack is. It's then going to do some math to figure out what the defense factor is going to be. So how much defense is going to apply to the damage. And then power is used as part of this equation to kind of like change how strong a specific ability is. If you've played Pokemon before, Pokemon usually has different moves having different, I think they call it power value. I'm not sure actually what they refer to it as. But this is kind of like how strong this skill is what this value is supposed to be. So where does get power come from? This gets used as part of a event system. Comes from here. Right, and we can have a magic power or a physical power, which is determining whether or not we're using the attack stats or the defense stats, or we're using the magic stats or the aka magic attack or magic defense. Okay. Some of this stuff is from Liquid Fire blogs, which I've mentioned before is like where I started 4 years ago. Most of that stuff has been removed or reworked pretty heavily, but some of this like low level damage and like formula stuff is still kind of based off of that original tutorialization, which is still quite good. I've reworked a lot of it. That doesn't mean that it wasn't a great foundation though. Fantastic tutorial. So this is coming from the shove effect. So this is a situation where this shove effect is being used by shove, but shove is the one who actually has the power. So this has a physical ability, so it's going to use the strength and defense stats, and it has a level of 10. And I think I want these powers to be in levels of like 10 and 20. Actually, let's bring up the spreadsheet for this data. So this is, again, kind of just a spreadsheet that works out everything that should be happening in-game. But if we have a power of... Okay, where are these stats coming from? If we have an attack of... Oh no. Where is it getting these numbers from? FF8 was one of the base ones that I was using. I've since modified pretty heavily to make something that's my own, but FF8 was like a really good reference. Here it is. This is what I'm looking for. So players attack 10, saying that defense is 10. And then we have a power of, say, 10. Then we should be expecting that we would do about 16 final damage, between 16 and 17. And then I add a bit of variance to that. Kazukish in the Twitch chat with the belated congratulations on the marriage. Appreciated and thank you. So if we go up to 100 power, that's a pretty massive increase. Okay. Okay, and if we go back to those numbers I had, which were randomly in here from the last time I touched this sheet, which was, I would imagine, I'm not going to go look at it, but if I was, actually I'm going to just look at it off screen. Yeah, The last time I touched the sheet was in 2023 January. Yeah, so this would have been the end of right as we were finishing up with the Era of Embers and deciding to switch over to infinite retries. So yeah, I haven't touched this in a while. So if we go back here and we go from 10 to 40, okay. So changing the power of an ability has a pretty huge impact on how much damage we're doing in my current formulation. Yeah, and we can see here the way I calculate it, in case anyone is curious, is attack to the power of 2. So whatever our attack stat is to the power of 2, divided by 8 plus our magic attack. And then base attack is equal to base attack minus 10 minus the defense divided by 2. And this is kind of just like reducing that stat by a large amount. Then we ratio that defense by how much defense we have out of our max cap stat of 256. So if we have, like we're figuring out a percentage or ratio of how much defense we have out of the max possible defense. And then we do a defense factor, which is some nonsense that we then apply to the base attack to figure out defense applied. And then with defense applied, we times that by power divided by 8 again, which again is really all just a lot of math to try and get it so that when we have low numbers like 24, we're doing like low-ish numbers. So like 10 here is going to do like somewhere between 0 and 100. As we start going up, we will see our damage start to go into the hundreds. But when we reach like 256 attack, yeah, that makes sense. We start going up into very large numbers. And that's because the defense of the enemy was so low. So if you hit... so if you go back to the first zone and hit a defense 10 enemy, you're going to cap out at like the what I want to start at as 9,999. But if you're fighting an enemy who is appropriately defensively statted to you with like 100 power ability, you're going to reach close to the max stats. Yeah, I'm just working it out myself, honestly, because like I said, it's been, what is 2023 January? That's almost 2 years since I've touched this. So I'm just validating if this is still what I want, and I think it is. This seems fine. We can see what the percent reduction is based off of the amount of defense. So yeah, this is how much, depending on how much defense they have, this is the percent we're reducing their damage by, I guess. You know what? I wouldn't trust everything in this sheet. Okay. So if I do a 10 power ability with max stats on both the defense and the attack, we're doing 1,000 damage. If I do 100, then I'm doing close to that. If I do, I'm going over the cap. Okay, so I think if I'm remembering correctly, I set this up in such a way that the power of an ability should be somewhere between 0 and 100. 10 being a really weak ability, and 100 being a really strong ability. Okay, that's what I needed. So then if that's the case, I want to have this shove to have an ability of 10. And then I want light to have a probably somewhere in the 35 power range. And then heavy, we still want to be a relatively early ability, so maybe 55? Actually, maybe we want to do like shove 5, light attack 15, heavy 25? Because we had it at 1, 3, and 5 in the prototype damage values. So this would keep them in the same ratios between each other. Or I could do 10, 30, 50. I don't know. Let's start here and see how the damage numbers work out, but I might tweak this. We probably don't want to start with 5 because 5 might be like, we might want to go down lower, but we'll start with 10. And then because that's the starting point, we'll go with 30 for the other one to keep the factor of 1, 3, and 5 that I already had for the prototyping stage. Yeah, and this is 50%. This is like half as good as you could possibly get, giving us a lot of room to... Well, maybe not a lot of room, but room to get better abilities in the long term. I think that should be fine. We shouldn't have to modify anything else. So that's 19. That's 52. Oh, that's interesting. So one thing I did that I really like, but might cause us problems in the long term, is I made this ability called contextual move. So every time you move a square, it's actually performing this contextual move ability. And so what that allows us to do is when I push on the D-pad and I run into this enemy, I'm not hitting shove down here. I'm hitting the D-pad, and the D-pad is performing a shove effect as part of the contextual move. But because this isn't actually the shove ability, this is a shove effect inside of the contextual move ability, it's using this number. And so by the same token, when I move here and dash rush, that's only doing 20. That's only doing 20 because it's using this 10 as well, even though normally this dash attack, which is what light attack uses, we'd like to be 30. So I might need to rethink how I do this contextual move, because it probably should be using not just the effects, but actually should be calling the specific abilities. That's a problem for later. I'm not figuring that out on stream, but that's an interesting realization. Interesting realization indeed. Okay. But I do have the damage showing up. I think what probably makes the most sense actually is that this shouldn't be a set value. This likely should be like this found tiled, valid tile, distance. These are like properties. I should probably make the ability power a property as well. That way other effects can modify it. So the shove effect could have like one node at the very top here, which is like literally just setting a parameter or setting a property. So if we just grab one of these objects, just for now, and then we add a property component, set ability property component, then we were add a property component, which would be here, and we were to call this like power, and we were to set this to 10, and then if we were to have the same thing down in here but set it to 30, then that would allow us to keep the same structure, but each of these can decide, depending on whether or not we're doing a shove effect or a dash effect, how strong they are. I don't hate that. I don't hate that at all. Okay. Do I want to overhaul that right now, though? This is coming from get power. These might want to be the same thing, actually. This might be when I finally refactor this part of the old code out. This isn't really what I wanted to work on today, though. Don't get distracted. But I think what I'm realizing is if we look at one of these attacks, they have like a bunch of these like abilities parts built into them, which is based off of like that older kind of ability system. But the way that I've built everything now to be so modular based off of like what would I think normally be referred to as like a blackboard inside of the abilities themselves, some of this stuff is a little dated in how it's constructed. These properties should just probably be set. So rather than just be like, hey, I would like to use attack, I should probably be able to just choose like, hey, I want to make a new property and I would like to set it like, rather than have a set property ability effect, we might want to be like assign stat to property ability effect. That's just like, hey, I would like to assign this property value to whatever drop down stat I choose. So I can choose attack or defense or whatever and use that as the base attack that I choose for this ability. That would give me way more flexibility long term. Okay, cool. I said it aloud, so if I want to come back and check the VOD, I can figure out what I want it to do. But for now, let's move on. We're not going to reinvent the wheel on that. We were doing way more damage than I thought, though. We were doing like 20 and 50, depending on which attack we were doing. I think that's because the AI, I increased their health, but I have not given them any decent stats. So let's also start them at 10, 10, and 10. Which is kind of where I think I built my damage formula around. I never intended you to have below 10 stats as like a starting point. Because I don't know of a lot of RPGs where you start with like, you have 1 strength. I mean, there's probably some out there, but for whatever reason, my mind goes to like, you start with like 8 strength or something. Or 11. Okay, so that does 30. If I shove, that does 11. Okay. That rush is doing 11, but that's because that's based off of the contextual move, not the normal A press light attack. If I do heavy, that does 48. Okay, so when their stats are about equal, the power value is almost the same as the damage. Is that just because of the way that I built the formulas? Where is it? Here. So we have a power of 10, and we have stat 10, stat 10. We should expect to do 17 damage. If we do 30, we should expect to do 50, and if we do 50, we should expect to do 84. So something about the way that I implemented the damage formulas from the Excel sheet into the actual code is not operating correctly. Somewhere the math is off. Let's validate. So let's go check inside of damage ability. Damage ability effect. So in here, debug, attach debugger. Let's see what these values are. Let's start there and make sure that we're actually seeing the correct information. This scares me a little bit. This is some breakpoints from earlier. Nope. Probably should have deleted all breakpoints before starting. Definitely should have deleted all breakpoints before starting the stream. Okay, we are moving forward. This will be a 10 power attack, I'm pretty sure. Because this is a contextual move basic attack. 10, 10, 10. Okay. Now, we are doing base attack, which is math power. Oh, let's bring up the sheet. Hello, Red Yoshi. Welcome. So let's not worry about figuring out the formulas right this second. Let's just see if what we had written down is correct. This may not actually be what we're doing in the spreadsheet. I'd have to go through and double check every one of these functions. Oh, don't do whatever I just did there. So I'm expecting that I'm going to raise attack to the power of 2 and then divide it by 8. Then we add the elemental attack. Oh, this was for Era of Embers. That's what this is. Oh, because we had elemental magic attacks based off of whether or not you were consuming an element. Right. So if you consumed an element, you could do like a bit of extra bonus damage, which won't happen at all for infinite retries, but that's what that code is. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so this will always just be base. Is that where the extra damage is coming from? Probably. Plus 34. So this is that value, and currently it's 0. So if I make this 10, yeah, okay. So no, it's not. So alternate attack is 0, which the formula in the sheet is also saying 0. So that's not the reason why our numbers are different. Red Yoshi says, dead tired, then you should take a break. Get some sleep. VODs will be there. Or, you know, just don't watch. That's also fine. Let's do... I want the spreadsheet back. Thank you. Okay, so we're doing this divided by 10. We're adding the alternate attack, which is like to do with the elemental system from Era of Embers. And then we have defense ratio, which is going to be defense here. 265 minus defense divided by 265. That looks like it should be fine. What is this line doing? Base attack is equal to defense divided by 2. That should be this line. So it looks like here I may have modified this at some point. I wonder why I made this change. Was it for the better? Or was it for the worst? Let's find out. Let's stop debugging. But that's probably the difference in damage values we're seeing. I don't know how interesting this content is, considering it's me trying to figure out how I wrote the damage formulas 2 years ago for a different game. So that does 10. That does 33. That does 47. So that didn't seem to do anything. Not enough brackets might actually be the problem. It looks like it's supposed to be that. Let's give that a try and see if that makes a difference. Morphous, I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse. Okay, so that's 19 now. That's 52. I think that brings the numbers back in line with the spreadsheet. Okay. Cool. That's 17. That's about 50. And so we'll try doing a heavy attack, and we should expect it to be somewhere around 84 damage with these current stats. To be fair, it took me like, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks to figure out this damage formula, so I'm definitely going to reuse it. Oh, that was broken. Very hard to explain how, but... Oh, I know what I did. I did something dumb. Okay, 84. I managed to do it. But what was happening there was if I hit an attack ability, it's performing, it's going forward even though it's like spending time, even though there's not a valid target. And that's to do with something I was working on right before the stream started, which I'm going to undo. I was trying to get it so that if we pushed in a direction that we couldn't move, that we would change our facing to look that way. Turn ability effect? Direction ability effect? What was the... I modified something so that it says that it's a valid effect, and I don't know which one it was. Facing. I added this, like, when predicting and determining if this, like, we do a predict phase for all our abilities to, like, figure out what's going to happen. And then we always make sure that an ability effect must set valid to true at some point in the phase. And if it gets set to valid, then it can be performed. If no effect ever sets it to valid, then that predicted ability will not execute because it's not a valid ability to perform at that time. So I made it so facing was a valid ability, but that means that anything that has facing in it is now going to perform even if there's not a target, which is not what I want. And I think I fixed it in a different way anyways. Yeah, so that code's just not needed and is causing bugs. I'm going to skip a turn. Oh. Now it is not performing at all. What did I do? Super fun. Okay. I don't know if I want to deal with this right now. Yeah, I broke everything. Let's remove this. I could bring up source tree and we could go through all the files to try and figure out which change I've made in the past little while has modified this, but I was also bad and didn't commit any of the skill tree stuff that we did last time, so there's going to be a ton of file changes. Alright, that does 17. Oh yeah, dash attack is just fully broken. We were able to perform that earlier. Contextual move is working. So by removing that code, we are now making it so that these abilities are no longer valid. Okay. Oh. Simple was setting valid. That's a fun bug. Yeah, simple. Okay. So, can you see the problem? So we had changed out simple for normal damage, but normal damage is not doing the stuff that simple does, which is setting valid. But because of a bug I created before stream, where we're always setting it to valid if it has facing, which should not be true, that meant that even after the switch, it was just working. But by fixing that first bug that I created before the stream so that setting facing doesn't actually make it a valid move, that meant this wasn't valid either. Oh, that's fun. Oh, that's fun. Okay, let's come into here. So what was this doing? So the predict step was We need more stuff. We need core. We need to use the core libraries. So this was going in and it was doing a predict. It was grabbing the tile. It was grabbing the defender. Oh, interesting. This was doing a display damage on the tile of the prototype damage amount. I don't think we want to do that anymore because we don't want to just like, well, we could show like a range. Like if we know what, we could predict what the damage formula will work out to, and then we just add a variance of 10% right now is all we're doing. So we could just like figure out the low percent value and the high percent value and then just show both of those on the tile. We could, but also I've kind of removed most of that system anyways. This is kind of a holdover for when we were doing stuff that was a little bit more tactical. And we would show all the numbers. Like every action would like, you'd have to choose to do an action and then you had to do a perform step or a confirm step, sort of like this. So you could see these like performances, and you can still get it by like just clicking the ability with no valid target in front of you. But if you ever face a target with one of those actions, it auto performs. I don't know. It's probably not necessary to show the damage on here. Skip my turn. Heavy. 77 damage. Okay. Yeah, that's within the range of around 84 by plus or minus 10%. Okay. These numbers feel a little high to me to start with. Again, these numbers were tuned more so around a kind of more traditional Final Fantasy JRPG experience, Final Fantasy VIII being the reference. I think what I want to do is I want to bring that number down. I can do that in two ways. I can either bring down the power levels. So instead of being 10, this could be 5. And then we could do 15, 30, which would bring us back into that same range of, you know, low damage, medium damage, high damage. Or we can crank up the defense of the enemy. What does that do? Let's make this a little bigger. So if we change this value from 10 to 15, that really only modifies it by like a point. If we make it like 256, then obviously that like reduces it down pretty heavily because it's a pretty large percentage reduction. Yeah, so increasing the enemy's defense is going to have a pretty drastic increase on... Sorry. We'd have to increase the defense of the enemy pretty drastically to see any kind of noticeable decrease in the amount of damage we're doing. So if we were doing 30, like... This is dropping it by like 13 points, but it feels like the wrong number to modify. The other option is we could start with a lowered attack value. That has a pretty major impact. So if we start with like 5 attack, then we go from like 4... $12, $20? Was that 12? 13-ish, 21. And what does that do with each increase of strength? So if we are at 50, then an increase of strength is 9 points of damage. If we're at 10 and we go to 11, I guess that's really the ratio I care the most about, is when we go to the Goddess Realm, we go into our skill tree and we buy one stat improvement. How much of an impact do we want that to have? Double checking the streams to make sure everything's okay while I think about this. I'm not delaying, you're delaying. So if I bought 2 points, it's a pretty massive increase. Well, if an enemy has... Okay, let's assume heavy attack does 84 damage, right? Let's say that's where we start at, 85. If we times that by 3... times 3... that's 255 health. Would be about what we need. Now, if we get low roll on that 10% plus or minus... I think that, like, if we get low roll, it would take us 4 hits. If we make sure to get crack even or high, it'll take us... If we low roll, it's 4 hits. If we get even or above, it's 3 hits. But then if we get 1 point of attack, that puts us at 102, which guarantees that we'd be able to hit a 255 health enemy in 3 hits. Actually, let's do it this way. Equals the health of the enemy divided by the amount of damage we're doing on average. That means even if we low roll, we're going to guarantee get it in 3 hits, because we always have to round up, obviously, which we could bake into this as well. Round up. That's 3 hits. Okay. Hits to defeat. Okay. Enemy health. Okay, well, listen. Let's just make this 255. And then we will make a different value, which will be this number times 3. 3 hit damage. Okay? So we'd need to make this like 310, and then it goes back up to 4. Alright, so then if we go to 12 attack, it's still only 3 hits, but I bet you on that plus or minus you'd probably get there. So average bear with me. Okay. So if we grab this value, and we times it by 1.1, I'm sorry, that comes out to what? Okay, I'm going to need to figure that out in a second. I'm just going to copy this, though, and we're going to do this value again, and then this value here. We're going to times this by 0.9. So this will tell us, like, min value, max value. Min hit, average, max. Okay? And then this is hits to the feet. Damage, range. Why is this coming out to 1? Nope, not what I'm trying to do. Okay, copy this whole thing. Okay, can we just not? Can we not? Let's do this properly. I'm just gonna put $signs everywhere so it stops modifying my formula. Okay, and then if we just look at what this value is. Okay, I need the equal signs, my bad. That's 109, okay? Now if we look at what this value is. That's the wrong value. That's the problem. I think. Wait. I got them backwards. That's what's happening. This value is supposed to be here. This value is supposed to be here. There we go. Okay. That still feels wrong. All right, we'll have to break it out. Just make all these formulas. This is equal to this value. Okay. This is the... Okay, I see what I did. This now needs to be moved over here because we're modifying this value. And this needs to be in brackets. Because everything was backwards from the beginning, and because I did that, it meant everything else was backwards. Perfect. Okay, and we're going to just copy this in here and copy this here. And we're going to make this one as well, just for clarity. Now, holy smokes, if I change this value here, these values change. If I change this value back down to 10, these values change. Holy smokes. YouTube says, I'm so confused with what's happening. That's 100% fair. There's a lot of numbers on screen. Let's see if we can simplify this. We're going to duplicate this sheet. We're going to make a simplified version of this. Simple calc. Okay. We don't need any of this. Nope, doesn't like something about that being deleted. What? Don't... That value is required for some reason. Let's see. Are these values needed? Yes. What about these values? No. Okay. Perfect. Now let's grab this. Let's delete all of these. Let's grab all of this content. Let's move it up here somewhere. Let's grab all of this. That's not touching any of the stuff I care about. We're going to move it way off screen down here. This is still working. Okay. Then we're going to grab this stuff over here. Grab that. And we're going to move that over here. Then we're going to insert all this stuff to the right. And we're going to hide this column because I don't think it actually helps us with the story. Go away. Get off screen. Okay. Okay, so these are our two headers. Hydrate's a good call. Oh God, there's no water. Okay, hydration complete. But the next time, I'm going to have to go refill it. So, if we have an enemy health of 255 with a defense of 10, then it will take us if our player attack is 10, then it will take us this many hits to defeat them. Other things I would like to pull up and out of here is the power value. If I drag this up here, would all my formulas still work? Yes, spreadsheets are smart enough, so if I change this to 10, it does work. Okay, so this is ability power. Okay. And then, I don't know what this is, so I'm going to just hide this row. Let's be happy. Okay. Amorphous with the 5 gifted subs. I appreciate you. Gotta go to work. I'll still be cool. Thank you and appreciated. And have a good day at work. Let's grab enemy health. Let's drag that up here so it's next to enemy defense. Let's make this some sort of reddish color. And then I don't know what this is. Can we just maybe, I'm gonna also hide these columns as well, and then just go away, go off screen, go away. Okay, I'd also like to grab the final damage number, which I think I hid during the process here. This is the damage. Okay, and then we can hide these again. Go away, get off screen. Cool. Whole bunch of work, but hopefully this is more clear. This is final damage. So this is the final amount of damage that we are going to do, right? This is the important number. We're going to make this like an orangish color. So this is the final damage. This is how much damage we do with these parameters. So if we have an attack of 10 with a power ability of 10 with a defense of an enemy with 10 who has 255 health, the health part doesn't really matter, to be honest with you. It kind of is its own thing over here. But that's this will be the final damage. This is this final damage times 3. Final damage times 3. This doesn't really matter for the purposes of what we're doing. This is just like neat data. Neat data. And so that's all that is. So if I change the enemy health down to 50, that changes the number of hits. So if this thing here is, if we are doing our minimum amount of damage, which is 90%, which if we want, we could break that out into its own column. So we could do 0.9, and we could do this value here is equal to 0.9, and then this value is 1, and this is 1.1. This is our damage variance. This is damage range. We could merge these and say that this is damage range variance. And then this is the number of hits to defeat the enemy with this amount of health. Just finish this idea. Spreadsheet magic. Okay. So if we have a 50 ability or 50 attack power ability, then no matter what, we're going to one-shot the enemy, because we're going to do 84 damage and the enemy's only going to have 50 health. If we bring the enemy up to 255 health, then on average, it's still going to take us 4 hits if we're doing average or minimum. But if we do the maximum amount of damage, we could get lucky and 3-hit an enemy. Cool. That's really all I was trying to do. We're just trying to figure out like what these values are. So now we have something that's more readable for hopefully people in chat. And I'm going to now just play with these numbers to find something that I think looks good. So I think attack power 50 feels very high. Like 84 damage versus 50 damage versus 16 damage feels like a pretty large spread. So this means if we were to hit an enemy with shove continuously without using any of our other abilities, it would take us somewhere in the range of 14 to 17 hits to kill the enemy. If we hit them only with light attack, it would take us 6 to 5 hits to kill them. And if we did a heavy attack, which we're currently giving a power of 50, then it would take 3 to 4 hits. If we bring the attack value down to 5 again, if we start with 5 attack instead of 10 attack, then obviously the enemy's health needs to be reduced as well. Let's say we have a 100 health enemy. That's a pretty even number. Then 50 is 5 to 6, 8 to 9. Then 10 is just dropping off a cliff in terms of the number of hits. And modifying the defense of the enemy has an impact on these values, but it has to be a pretty large increase in the defense because these are percentile. It's like percentilely reducing the incoming damage. So early on, a few points of defense isn't really making a big difference. Really, the enemy defense is going to be a way to scale the end game damage so that we don't just have the enemy run away. The player doesn't run away in progression is really what the enemy defense is for. So that as you get into later areas, the enemies have more defense, which means that you will have to increase your attack in order to continue to deal with them. It's the progression curve, essentially, is what this stat is being used as. So these two stats are really like the progression of the player in the current zone you're in. So if I get an attack point, if that's a 2-point increase, but as I go up in power, that 1 point means a lot more. This is a hard thing to solve, like on stream, because honestly, I don't have a lot to talk about here, other than just like, I need to play with numbers. The there is a little bit of discussion about, like, how big do we want these numbers to grow? And, like, how big we want the numbers to fly off the enemies to be. So, like, it's more fun to see bigger numbers, but we do want to leave room for those numbers to grow throughout the course of the experience, through the game experience. So, like, I feel like 17, 48, like, 48 feels like a big hit when we first start. So overall, I want to bring the numbers down. And I can either do that by bringing the player's starting strength down, or attack value. If I bring their stat down, then we'll deal less damage to them. But as we grow in stats through the skill tree, we will very quickly see that our abilities that have higher power will grow pretty quickly. And our low-powered abilities will grow, but they'll grow much slower. If we start with 5 power and then go to 15 and then 25, that halves everything. That means versus an enemy with 100 health, as like a starting enemy in the first zone, we will need to 3-hit them with our strongest attack. And versus our kind of basic attack, we'll have to hit them 4 or 5 times depending on variance. Okay. I want to start the player at 8 attack. We're not going to worry about magic attack versus normal physical attack for now. We're just going to leave them somewhat equal. Okay. Player's starting health is going to need to be higher too, so we're going to say like 45, 45. These seem like reasonable starting numbers. For the enemy, I think right now we only have 1 and we're not using design data to drive them. That is something I will need to change later. Let's start them at 50 health. Let's have them start at like 5 attack. And I like them at 10 defense to begin with. We're going to modify the abilities. If Unity decides to load. We're going to modify the abilities so that we start with a 5 physical power, 15, and 25. We're going to leave this at 10 for now. I have to solve that at a different point. I don't know if this is perfect, but I think that this is a good starting point at the very least. And this should give us some numbers that are potentially reasonable. So if I do like a light attack, we're going to do like 16. If I do a heavy, we're going to do like 26. So if we do a light attack, that's 16 and 16 is somewhere in the range of like 30 damage. And then if we follow that up with a heavy attack, that's doing 27. So yeah, it's about 3 hits to kill. If I was to just do light attack over and over again, it'd be 4 hits. Drixie in chat asks, this will not scale automatically. If anything has to be shifted later in the game, correct? Yes. Each enemy will need to have their stats defined. In fact, we'll need to, at some point, hook it up so that the enemies are actually driven by, like, actual design data. Like in here, I had, like, stats driven for each of the enemies in Era of Embers. We'll need to do something similar inside of Infinite Retries, where each of the enemies were spawning grabs from, like, a design data enemy template and then insert all the starting stats based off that. Right now I'm essentially hard coding the stats directly into the enemy, so every enemy would have the exact same stats, but we only have one enemy, which is the bat right now, so that's okay. But we will need to have it so different enemies will have different stat templates, and eventually we could have it so that the bat reoccurs later in the game in a different area with different art, but we could just like change out its template to be having higher stats, thus scaling it later in the game. And the boar is coming, but I do not have that hooked up yet. So when the boar comes in, I will do the work to get multiple enemy stats hooked up. Now, where do we go from here? I think 50 health feels a little low to me still for the enemies. I think I'm going to try cranking it up to 75. Just nice round 5 numbers. Just 5 is round. Never hasn't been. And I think that's a good starting point for damage. And then when we play with the boar could have like a higher attack value, but like lower other stats. We should see how much damage we're taking. We're taking 1. That's because the enemy uses a outdated version of abilities. I believe it's using a prototype version called Attack right now. So it will also need to be updated to do normal damage, not prototype damage. We'll need to have the same effects. I'm going to bring it up here and we're going to disable simple. And then we have to make a question, or we have to decide on how much power an enemy has, because that will really determine its output. Let's give it 15, which is what we're kind of determining to be like a kind of neutral basic attack. Because shove is only 5, but that's because shove is meant to be more of a utility ability. So it's less powerful than even like a basic, just standard hit. So we're going to skip a turn, skip a turn. Still only taking 1. Am I wrong about what they're using? It is using an attack ability. It has a power of 15. Why did you still do 1? Interesting. And by interesting, I mean that it's broken. Okay, let's debug. Let's take a look at the damage. And let's try and figure out why its numbers are so off from what I would be expecting. There, it just took a really long time to process. Okay, so in here... Oh. Did we not get into here at all? It went to a different breakpoint, but it didn't go to this one. I mean, that would make some sense, I guess. The enemy is just, like, dealing damage, but it's not doing a damage ability? Is it still doing simplified somehow? It is still doing simplified. Can we get an idea of where this is coming from? Target is the player. Defender. Defender is null in this context. Okay, the attacker is the enemy. He's on tile 3-5. He has a move ability. Can we take a look at the call stack? It's on an object called damage effect. Okay. What is the parent object? Hit effect. That all sounds fine. AI attack. Okay. Yeah, I missed it. I must have misread. So we were modifying the wrong ability. So we weren't supposed to be modifying attack. We need to modify AI attack. AI attack. I mean, that makes sense, though. It didn't care that we modified attack because that wasn't what it was using. Drag this into here. Drag this into here. Toggle that off for now, just while I'm testing a lot of this stuff. And yeah, we'll give this a base power of 15. Again, I think different enemies should have different abilities. And different abilities should have different powers. And that's another way that we could make stronger variations of enemies too, is if they have the same stats, they could have different abilities that change how they feel to fight against. The fact that they're pretty slow does make it so that they're not threatening unless you just skip your turn over and over. It is doing a consistent 7. There was an 8. Does that make sense versus these numbers? So we're going to validate that. We're going to say that our enemy is doing an attack of... what did we say? 5 is what we've set them at? We set them at 5, yeah. With a power of 15. And I believe we did give our hero character a defense of 10. So that means final damage is about 6. So... yeah, it's probably rounding up is what I did. And then it can have a plus or minus of 10%, which is kind of occasionally doing 8. That seems fine. I mean, we'll need to feel out how that works as we get into more enemy fights, but right now it feels like we're able to kill most enemies before they get to do much to us. Yes, we took a hit of 8 there. But if we had even a little bit more damage, like a little more strength, we probably would have been able to defeat that bat before it got an attack on us. Hit, hit. There we didn't have as much action points when we reached the enemy. So we couldn't do as much damage before it got its attack in. Okay, this feels like it's taking us 4 or 5, maybe sometimes 3 if we're lucky, but it feels like 3 or 4 hits, aka 2 turns. That feels in the ballpark. We might want to tweak these values slightly, but not too upset by that. Holy smokes, it's been an hour and a half. I was going to say it didn't take that long, but no, that took a really long time. We did not even get to equipping yet, so getting mildly distracted here. Oh, this is also super zoomed out. Well, what are you going to do? So if we go back to the Goddess Realm, and we go to the skill trees, and we upgrade our strength by a couple of points, we should see that bats are easier to deal with, which is the whole point of everything we've been working on. What did I do? There's no errors. Okay, where is the skill tree? I can't move. It's gonna be one of those days. It's gonna fight me every step of the way. Components are not turned on. Okay, so if I turn on the components manually, but if I back out of the screen, it doesn't turn them off. But I'm still not in control here. I can see from the console commands that it is doing stuff, I think. This was working before I started the stream. Is it something to do specifically with returning to the Goddess Realm after a run? Yeah, it must be. Because I'm able to enter in here fine. I can go back and forth. I can close it. I can reopen it. I still have full control. It's... Oh, wait. What? Oh, no. I hit the wrong button. I wasn't hitting the interact. So, yeah, we're fine to enter in here. So, okay, well, we can test it this way. We can see we have 8, 11, 8, 11, which is what we started with. We can do plus strength 2, which should be a big jump in our damage. Interesting that it doesn't work on returning. It's such an odd bug. Oh, that must mean that when we go back to the Goddess Realm, we're in a different screen than I think we are? That's what's happening. We're... Okay, I can figure that out. But first, let's test this. So, 23 heavy does 43. And yeah, we like two-shot that enemy, basically. One hit on the engage, 24, and then a heavy hit for 46. So yeah, so now we can kill these enemies before they ever get a chance to hit us. With just one increase, well, it was a 2-point increase on the skill tree, but essentially by getting 2 points of strength, these guys got one hit easier, which means they're never threatening now. Which is probably too much of an increase. Well, he got a hit there, but that might have just been bad variance, I guess. Like if I show up and the enemy's right there before I get a chance to hit. Yeah, because the enemy does like the alert effect when they first see you on their very first turn. But that's mostly to kind of hamper the ability that when you first encounter them, when you're revealing tiles, they'd be able to hit you on like on a turn before you got a chance to do anything. They're definitely gonna get more hits on you when you're revealing them. Oh, ran out of time. Or they're going to get more hits on you when you're entering into a room where they've already been revealed. Because they're going to start with that, like, alert before you get a chance to even get close to them. So then as you approach them, they'll get a hit in. Maybe the alert is no longer necessary? Interesting. Just want to see how that feels without upgrading the skill tree at all. If we go in just with 8 strength instead of the 10 strength, how much difference that makes. Yeah, it makes a pretty big difference. Light attacks go to doing like 18 instead of like 23, 24, and heavy attacks go from doing like 43 to 26. 17. Yeah, like 29. It was definitely doing like 43 before, so it's a pretty big increase each stat. I think that's what I want, though. I think I want it to feel like each point you get on the skill tree has a pretty major impact on your damage output. And if we want the bats to stay more threatening for longer, we could just reduce your starting strength value. Yeah, because that's going to drop you a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna bring the stats down by 1 just to see if we can have the enemies feel more difficult a little bit more for a little bit longer. We'll have them feel more difficult for a little bit longer. Okay. Cool. So we have tweaked stats and we have modified progression. I think we have not a great progression, but we have something that feels a little bit better than just straight 1, 3, or 5. We're actually doing a variable amount, which is based off of your stats, and your stats can be increased through the skill tree, kind of, because there's a bug right now with it on returning. Now to get back to where I wanted to start an hour and a half ago, which is that when we start a run, we currently start with shove, light, and heavy as our attacks. But when we look in the skill tree, we actually only have one ability by default, which is this focus attack. I'd like to make it so that the abilities that you have access to that you can level up in the skill tree are actually the abilities you have in a run. So I think I want to modify... abilities a little bit. So we have the ability effects. I think I want to add a new class to each ability, which is going to keep track of that ability's type. An ability type is going to be something like high, mid, low. And depending on the ability's type, when you click the secondary button or the button in the skill screen to equip, that shall equip it to one of the 3 inputs based off of that ability's type. So essentially each ability is going to be assignable to a specific button, and you can't have 2 of the same type of an ability equipped. So if you do a mid type ability or a high type ability, you can only have one of those at any given time, and you'll have to choose which of those you want to take on your next run. That's the idea. Whether or not that's going to be fun, different problem. So we're going to start by coming up with the idea of an ability type. We're going to make that a component, a mono behavior. We're going to have that have a enum associated with it. Do we have an enum already? Enum folder for abilities. I'm going to embed it in here as I prototype this out. Enum ability type. They can't have the same name though. Well, I'm going to be done typing in a second, and I haven't thought of an alternate name for this. I suppose I could just make this directly on... I don't have to have a different component. I could just have it on the ability itself. I don't love that. We're going to do it this way for now. I don't I don't think this is what I want, but I'm not so concerned about what the name of the component is right this second. I will figure that out as we discover what this thing is going to do, because I think it's going to have more functionality. I just don't know what all that functionality is off the bat. Now, if we look at these abilities, we should be able to add a new ability type component. And we are going to make it so this thing has a public ability type parameter. And we're going to assign each of these. So we're going to assign shove to low for now. I don't know if this is where they'll be in the end, but we're just going to give them spots. We're going to give this light attack a middle, and we're going to give heavy high. Okay. Now we're going to modify the skill screen. This one. This thing has an on secondary button press, which would what that used to do is equip the ability. We are going to need to modify this, so instead of doing the old equip system, it's going to grab the current unit. It's going to get the ability specs from it. I need the ability specs. How do I get the ability specs? This is something unique to this project. Oh, we literally just do get ability spec off of it. Okay. That's fine for now. I'm going to do the same thing. I kind of need to know which button we're on when we push this. So I need to figure out from our current selection. How did this know which button we were on before? M current ability spec. Oh, that's done every time we select a new button. We just grab that. Interesting. What values are on here? There's an is equipped. Okay, okay. So we can check whether or not the current button you have is equipped. And if it is, we're going to unequip it. So we're going to grab the current unit. We're going to grab the abilities from that current unit. We're going to get ability. We're going to set ability. How do I set? Update ability at input, not set. Okay. And we're going to update a specific ability. We can do null at the input. That is associated with that button type. Okay, so that requires some sort of converter, because we're not going to know input. We're going to know that abilities. So given the current spec, we want to know... Oh, this is complicated. All right, graphing time. All right. Let's clean this one up. Get rid of all this. Get rid of all the arrows. Okay, so we have a unit state. That unit state has an ability spec in it. In fact, I probably still want these 3. We have a unit. The unit has ability specs, which is like basically just a reference to this object. The unit also has a list of abilities. Abilities are the actual abilities that unit has on them. Inside of those abilities, it has a list, which we're going to change this icon to be like that, I guess. The abilities have a list of input to ability. Okay. All right. In the skill screen, we have the skill screen. We have a... What do we have? We have a list of ability specs. So not a list of abilities, but a list of ability specs. So that's these things. So inside the skill screen, we have a list of ability specs, and we're able to go through those and upgrade them and modify them, essentially. But if we, given a specific ability spec, so given a specific object, specific ability spec, we want to assign that ability spec that we are currently looking at to one of those inputs on the unit's list of abilities. But we don't want to do this immediately on the screen, because if we do it at screen time, it'll change when we switch to a new room. So this is currently hard-coded. So this needs to not be hard-coded. This is all wrong. We should not be modifying the equipped abilities when we hit a button. This should be done when we construct the unit. So in here, we do abilities, we do an initialization. This is doing a bunch of stuff to create all the prefabs and particles that we're going to need in order to have this ability perform. And all of the assigned abilities to each input already exist. So the only time we update it right now is for the right trigger, which is to do with the interact system. Should we then assume... Yeah, so this is all wrong. This is not what we need to do. What we're talking about doing here is making it so that this unit, which is an object in the scene, this is a scene object, right? This thing needs to construct this list, and it needs to construct it based off the unit state. So this is like some back-end save data, basically. So whatever, when we go into a new room, when it goes to create this unit object, it needs to create this list. It needs to create this list of abilities assigned to each input based off of information inside of the back-end save information. And then this skill screen here, I think the problem is that the skill screen is going to grab this list of abilities here. So this information is going to get put into here. And then when we go to do an action, which is like equip specific ability, I think that information needs to go back into the ability spec. That way, when the scene object tries to grab the ability specs and figure out which one's equipped, this is what knows that information. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. This is what we need to do. So this doesn't exist right now. This doesn't exist. And this concept doesn't exist. This kind of exists, and this thing just doesn't. Okay, so none of this exists. This is hard-coded. Let's start there. So let's take a look at the character. So if we go to player, 3D player, infinite retries, design data, abilities is not what we're looking for. Dungeon, nope. Prefabs dungeon. Again, we said this at the start of the stream, but this is weird. I don't like this folder structure. It's bothering me more and more. So all of this stuff with like default attack, navigation, start. I think navigation makes sense to have pre-equipped. We're never going to modify what ability you're navigating with. Maybe? Default attack is essentially what happens when you go to push into an enemy with the D-pad and there's already an enemy in the square you're trying to move to. That's what default attack is. And right now the navigation and the default attack are both contextual move. Default attack we might want to be equipable, but for the time being, in the sense of trying to get this working, I'm going to assume that that one's off the table. We will figure out how that one works later. Right now I'm more concerned about the buttons, X, Y, Z, or whatever, east, south, west, north, that these are the ones I actually care about. So right now these are pre-assigned to heavy, light, and shove. I'm going to delete each of these, and I'm going to add one for north. This is the right trigger. This will become button north. And these will be defaulted to empty, which means if we now run the game, the only things we can do is the contextual moves, and we will have no abilities on the face buttons, which we can't really test in this scene because we always have nothing in this scene. That's part of being in those Goddess Realm areas. You just can't perform attacks. But if we come in here, we should also have no attacks. And if I hit these buttons, nothing should happen. Yeah, I'm hitting these buttons and they're not doing anything. We're not losing time because there's no abilities assigned to any of this. And that's okay. So then we need to fix this red bar. So we need to look at the list of ability specs, and we need to assign them to the inputs when we construct the unit. So inside of abilities initialize, before we construct all the particles that we need, we first need to do addition. So we need to update ability at input. Okay. Oh. I see a problem. Okay, let's get this partially functional, and then we're gonna deal with the issue in a moment. So we need to do backend state manager.instance.getUnit state. From this, we can get the unlocked ability specs. And we can then loop through these ability specs. This needs to be wrapped in infinite retries. Oh no. Oh no. Oh, two problems. Okay. Let's talk about this problem. So, abilities is part of the core libraries of the engine. It is not part of infinite retries, is not part of error of embers. It is separated out and not part of either of those code bases. The concept of an ability spec has been moved to be unique per project. But that means that if I want to know about an ability spec inside of this core library, it has no idea that it exists. So we can't directly reference the unit state because this system doesn't know about it. So we have two options. We hack it so that this thing that shouldn't know about ability specs gets to know about ability specs. Option two is we don't hack it, but we make a new ability equip class that's specific to the Infinite Retries game project that will need to get initialized along with abilities, and it will be in charge of updating the ability infos to have the correct equipped abilities in each of the inputs. That also feels weird. The third option is figure out a way to reunite the ability specs into core so that both Error of Embers and Infinite Retries uses the same ability spec system, which is a huge refactor and not something I want to do right now. Okay, so there's three options. I said two at the beginning, but there's really three. We're going to do it right. We're going to do it right. Okay, so we're going to do unlock ability specs. We're going to... There's no right answer here, I should be clear, but we're going to make a separate class. We're not going to hack it. I need a different... Okay. Perfect. Okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna come into the ability spec stuff for RPG under infinite retries. We are going to make a new class, which is going to be the ability equipper. We'll just call it ability equip. Ability equip is going to have a public init function. It is going to take the abilities inside of Unity, the unit player state beta. Actually, we're going to come into here. We're going to construct the abilities. We're going to construct the ability equips. We're going to add component, because this won't exist and I don't want to have to go add it to every single one. Right, yes, this is correct. This needs game object dot. This becomes ability equip. Ability equip is not something that is on every ability, it is on the unit. So maybe there's a world in which this should be called abilities equip. Okay, so this is at the unit level. We are making one component that is getting added to the unit at the start. Does this even need to be a component? Oh, maybe I can just do the logic here. We just have to do it between the init. So I guess for now we could just do it here. Update ability add input. Yeah, even better. Okay, so we don't create a new class. We just inside of this beta state, which is a beta component. I want to make it better eventually anyway, so this is a great spot to put this information. So in here, we're going to just do abilities dot update abilities add input. We're going to need to loop through all of the data from the backend. Backend state manager dot instance dot get unit state, and we're going to need to get the unlocked ability specs. We're going to loop through all of these. Ability spec. This knows about this information, and this is where we were a moment ago. Just had to find the right spot to put it. Okay, now we're going to go through every ability spec, and we're going to upgrade. We're going to do a if ability spec is equipped, then we are going to try and equip that ability spec given that ability spec's input. This is pseudocode, but this is what we're trying to do. So if an ability spec is equipped, we're going to, given its input, assign its ability. So how do we figure out inside of here? Does this have a get ability by name? It does. Oh no, this is get ability info by name. If the ability isn't assigned in here, we have no reference to it. Okay. Recoup. Rebuild. Move forward. That's fine. What we can do is we can try and find that ability. So we can write a little function that is just like public get ability child for now. Again, I'd like to rewrite this, but for now we can just say get ability child. No. Better. Got it. These shouldn't exist here. These should all be deleted. Except for maybe context move. And these ones here, which exist in these areas, should be addressables. This should be ability shove. This should be... This one already has a thing. Where is this getting used? Nowhere. Okay. I think that was me thinking ahead to this moment. I need to instantiate the equipped abilities. It's been a bit. Utils dot instance dot load addressable. Load addressable async. When do I use which? This is with an await. Oh no. Okay. Okay, no, this is fine. This is fine. Okay. Ability specs. Abilities. Abilities has a list of each ability. We need all of these abilities to exist. They are things. So if we have shove, or we have light attack, these are abilities. These need to go into this list. But I don't want to have every single ability that a character could possibly ever have underneath the unit scene object in the prefab. I want to have each of these be prefabs that can get loaded. When we do the scene load of the unit, that exists at a level. No, sorry, stop. Choose words wisely. When we go to load this unit, that is through a data loading system, essentially. Specifically inside of the here. Inside of the dungeon player manager, it is calling spawn. It is doing a utils addressable instantiate async, and it's saying load count plus plus, right? Then it spawns the player. This function is a callback, that is happening once the addressable is loaded. It is not going to happen instantaneously. We have to let Unity do its own thing. Once it spawns that unit, it calls this function. And then I say count minus minus, so I'm done loading this player. And this load is complete, and we will move on past loading the player and start loading the enemies only once this is done. We now, though, in order to load the unit, once we spawn the prefab, we'll now need to spawn more prefabs. Therefore, we are not done when we have finished spawning this. We are then instead going to need to do a, when we call init in here, we are going to need to register or update somehow this load count to say, hey, we're not done until all players have loaded all their information. So I think we want to do a I don't know. There's a couple different ways we could tackle this. But at its core, when we go to load this unit, we need to also at the same time load all of the abilities it's going to need. What if we load them first? There's so many ways to tackle this problem. By the time we get to this init, or in this init, we are going to need to load each of the ability objects. But we can't move on, and we can't say that the load is complete until all of those ability objects have been created. Okay, let's pull back from the Lay Siege song and pull into this march forward. Take it back a notch. Let's bring the hype down. How do I properly, quote unquote properly, track the loading of the abilities that this unit needs? Technically, the abilities are not inside of the player. The abilities are inside of the unlock state. So inside of the spawn, we could know what all of the different things we have are. And we could just load each of the abilities. Obviously, we're going to need to know the ability addressable ID that we're going to need to load. We're also going to need to have some sort of function which is going to need to be something like spawn ability. Which is going to need to reduce the load count each time we load a new one. Okay. We need to grab the ability specs ID for its ability. We're going to do a quick search on this across the whole project, because as I thought, it is used inside of Era, but it isn't used inside of Infinite Retries yet. And we can grab the ability design data. Okay. Then from the ability design data, oh, I typed the wrong character. All right, from the design data, we should be able to have a prefab ID. Associated with that ability. Okay. We are going to need to make sure that that is populated. So if we take a look at the ability design data, specifically the ability parser, and hopefully the infinite retries version. Nope. Hopefully the infinite retries version. Yep. Right now, this does take in a prefab ID. Okay. So if we head back out to Unity and we take a look at our design data files and we look at abilities, currently this is what we have. This is usually edited in a spreadsheet, but we're going to edit it here just for the sake of making things easy. So I don't have to go into Google, modify it, and then export it right now. I'm just going to modify it by hand. And I will update the spreadsheet later. And that should be fine as long as I separate everything with tabs. Light, attack, light, attack, and then this addressable ID. Heavy attack, heavy attack, I really only did it for light attack. Interesting. Okay, save that. Then we come into our tools, infinite retries, ability parser. Is that related to what I just did, or is that... That is complaining that this stuff doesn't make any sense, which it won't for a little bit. So we're just going to comment that out for now. Okay. Now we can come back into here, ability parser. I do not see the correct information there. I'm running the right one, right? IT ability parser? Yes. That implies that the infinite retries version of ability parser has not been set up correctly to look at the right location. Nope, that's infinite retries assets. That's infinite retries assets. That should be the IT version of it. Infinite retries, infinite retries. I kind of want to just delete all these because we really shouldn't need them for this project. Okay, so it's definitely parsing the wrong file. Amorphous in YouTube chat says, code complaining at you, just comment it out. I'm learning so much. I mean, I'm going to fix it relatively shortly, but we have to do things in the correct order. So why is it not loading this version? Is there like, so this is assets, infinite try assets, content, design data, TSV, game data, ability TSV. So that should be what's getting loaded here. So I guess the easiest thing to do is just to add a breakpoint and see what it's doing. Well, it's not calling that function. That would do it. They both have the same menu command. And so the JRPG one is getting run instead. Probably need to stop now. Yeah, Unity's all right now. Okay, that worked. Shove, light attack, heavy. And then if we take a look at that data in the JSONs, we see these were added. Interesting that my stuff doesn't remove the old versions. Might want to look into that. For now, though, we have added the IDs we need. So, if we go all the way back to the Dungeon Player Manager, we should now have appropriate IDs for the abilities, as long as the initial abilities we start with are correct. So let us start with where's the thing here? I'm just gonna make a small or a couple small edits. The constructor should be below these initializations, which is what's making this file hard to read. So in here, no, where do we initialize the default specs? Is that, oh, it's part of this. Okay, so we want to add shove. I will need to tutorialize the adding of each of these, but for now we will add shove, light attack, and heavy attack. I just realized I built spaces into their ID names, which is less than ideal. Those should be underscores or something, but I will deal with that. Honestly, right now. We'll deal with that right now. IDs. Not entirely the biggest deal, but I'd like it to be good. Expandable code, like, again, it doesn't really matter, but can reduce errors is the idea, because it's easy to see whether or not it's a space or a tab or whatever. It's not easy to see if the space or tab is supposed to be there, but it's easier to see if it's supposed to be an underscore. So it's just more readable for an ID name, I believe. Okay, so this loads, and I'm mostly just checking right now to see whether or not we see all three of our abilities in our list, and we do not. Because they don't have proper node setup data. So for the time being, we're going to just grab whatever we had done for... Oh, because it doesn't delete old ones. Okay. We're going to just reparse it so that we don't get confused. Okay. And then it just needs some proper like skill tree information in order for it to work. So we're just going to give it the same information across all of them. This is a bit hacky doing it here in the JSON file instead of doing it through our ability tree editor, but I just want it to look proper. And so this is the fastest way to do that, by just making them all identical. What are we doing on stream? Oh, everything's still working correctly. Dun, dun. Okay. Let's go over here. There's all three of those showing up, and they each should have their own grid that are correct. And if I come in here and I buy health increase, health increase, health increase, I have a bunch more health. Interesting, that modified my base health value, but in the previous times when I only bought one, it didn't. Okay, but those all three are showing up correctly now. So then if we come back to, oh god, where were we? In here, inside of the, if it is an equipped ability, we should grab that ability's design data, grab its prefab, and we will load it via spawn ability. Now we shouldn't spawn the player until all the abilities that that player is supposed to have is loaded. So we are going to have to wait on this call. And I think what we'll do, which is the easiest, is inside of spawn abilities, if the load count equals zero, aka we've loaded everything, then we can increase the load count again. We're going to need to store the player addressable. This is not... Okay, we're going to do it. It's fine. This is not expandable if I ever have more than one character, but this game isn't going to have more than one character. So we will solve those problems on the next game. Again, again, this cycle of wanting to build everything so perfectly, and I just feel like I end up never building anything sometimes. So in this particular case, we're just going to take the ID and store it here, player addressable ID, and then we will use it down here. I'm a little concerned that we might hit 0 on is complete and move on before this is ready. So what I might do is I might just make the count +1 higher than it needs to be, and then the moment that it's equal to 0 or equal to 1, we can move on. We can also add a check in here. If count is equal to 1, then we'll just load. This is if no abilities are loaded, which is a case that I think might happen early on. So if we go through all this and there's no load count, we know that we're going to be at only 1, and we will load the player because there's no abilities that we're loading, so we'll just load the player immediately. If it is not equal to 1, then we will just not do anything here. But when we finish spawning the last ability and we go back to a load count of 1, we'll then load the player. And then when the load player happens, that will get rid of that last load count, letting us finally go to 0 so that we don't have any race conditions. Unlockable character with the hydrate. I will be right back. I need to refill the water. Okay. Good. So, hydration complete. We have this thing that's serviceable. The part of this I don't like is the fact that this ID is not going to work if we're spawning multiple characters. But this system isn't really set up in a way that would allow us to spawn multiple characters anyways, because it only does one spawn. So if we ever wanted to spawn multiple characters, we could do that through probably having this be a list of player IDs. But again, that's still not going to quite work. So realistically, if we were to try and have multiple characters being spawned, we'd probably need another class in between that can be in charge of like loading all the abilities and keeping track of which character we're loading and making sure all that stuff lines up. But as we only have one player, we'll just do it all inside of this one dungeon player manager. Like another way to think about it is we'd need multiple dungeon player managers if we had multiple players. What does this thing do? This keeps track of the player's position. So this is completely a carryover to this manager from Era of Embers, when we needed to keep track of the dungeon player's spot that they got into a battle, so that when that battle was over, we could replace the player back in the dungeon in the exact same spot after that encounter. But this doesn't really store or save anything, does it? It still saves off, I would imagine, a player state. And it does grab the player position, but I don't know if anything's actually setting this, it doesn't seem like. This does. And this is getting done. No, all right. So, not really? Yeah. Okay. Well, this class is maybe in due for a refactor in general, which makes me feel better about kind of some of the way that this is set up. Because, like, what is this doing? This is doing nothing. Yeah, this has got some dead code feels to it. So there's a general refactor looking to come, but that is a later problem. For now, this is fine. We now have it so that we should have every ability we need loaded at the moment that we go to use it. Okay, so if we go back to the player state beta in here, we can recomment or uncomment this code and bring it back online. Now we can check the ability spec. And now we should be able to have some sort of get children. We will still need a get a child ability. This needs, in order for this to work, the abilities that we construct inside of here will need to stop. What are you doing? Stop it. Thank you. These will need to have a parent transform of the prefab we haven't generated yet. Oh no. Okay. All right, fine. Okay, we are going to have a list of loaded abilities. We will then take that list of loaded abilities and we will initialize it. We will then, each time we do a load here, do a dot object dot add object, and we will do get component ability, because all of these prefabs should be abilities. Otherwise, we've written our data wrong. Okay. Then when we go to load the player and we spawn that player in, we will need to pass in the loaded abilities to that player container. So now this will have a list of abilities, which will be loaded abilities. Now that loaded abilities will need to be looped through. Now we don't need the ability specs at this level, because the ability specs were just used to load everything. Then every ability loaded should be equipped. Is that a fair statement to make? Currently is. Okay. So let's assume that every ability that we loaded is equipped, because in order for it to get initialized, it had to be. So then we need to go through all of the abilities class, which is in charge of managing everything. And we're going to need to load this ability in. And we'll also need to make sure that we set the transform.parent at the same time to be this .gameObject, so that it will go underneath .transform. It'll go underneath. And then we need to figure out what that ability's input is. Wrong type of type. So we need to know what type of ability it is, which right now we need to do get component the way that I've currently written it, and do ability type component, and we will need to grab its ability type, and we'll need to convert that into an input, essentially. For the time being, nope, bad words. For the time being means I'm about to hack something, and we're not going to hack something. We're going to go into utility section. We want extensions. We have one for directions. We have one for facings. We have game object. We have notifications. We have some stuff for nav mesh, which I don't think I use anymore. I think we want to create a new extension in here, similar to the direction one, where we can take in a value and convert it to a different value. So, okay, so let's copy the direction one, because I think that's a good base for what we're trying to do here. And we're going to do a ability type extensions. This might be overkill, and in fact it probably is, but I think it could be good. Also, it's in core, and this probably should actually be inside of infinite retries. Let's drop this. Let's get rid of all of the other versions because we only need one right now. I can move this file to a better location after. Get input. And then if we have an ability type, we can do a switch in here. Seems slightly cleaner than the if statements I had before. Case, ability type, high, and then we can make it so that returns an input. What is it that the abilities actually wants? Inputs. Wants inputs. Inputs dot button north, I guess. This part matters less. We can change these up later. Mid will be button west, and low will be button south. Okay. This is upset that there isn't always a return though, so we will just return south as the default in case somehow this gets there, but it should never. And then we can come all the way back to the unit in here, and we can do get input. Okay. Now, we will spawn a player. As part of the spawning the player, we will go through any equipped ability specs. We will load all of those. We will keep track of all of them by adding them to this list. And then when we go to spawn the player, after we have loaded all the abilities, we will then pass in this information. This, if there are no ability specs, this will be an empty list, in which case, when we do this initialization, it will then loop through the empty list and do nothing. Otherwise, if we have loaded abilities, it will parent that ability underneath of this player character so that we can find them easily. And then we will update the abilities with that ability in that ability's type's input. So if it's high, it goes in the high input, which is going to be Y for now. This should function with the exception that none of the abilities are equipped right now. They are all false by default. So therefore we should see nothing happen. And I'd like to validate the nothing happens state before I write the last little bit of code. Okay. Are we here? Are we ready, chat? Okay, so we have no abilities here. That's to be expected. We come into here. We should also have no abilities, which seems to be working fine. I'm going to walk into the next room and try and attack an enemy just to be sure. And we've got Rush works. I can't hit any of the inputs. None of them are working to do anything. And I can use my contextual ability. So this still works. Contextually, I can hit this bat, and that's fine. Now, where we started, like an hour and 10 minutes ago, which honestly, that's the crazy part. It took me an hour and 10 minutes to write all the equip code, which felt way more stressful and way more like, am I doing this right? Lots of thinking, trying to figure it out. Hour and 10 minutes. First half of the stream, first hour and a half, literally just playing with spreadsheets, and time went by so fast. Okay, skill screen. We are looking for the skill screen in infinite retries. Inside of here, if a current ability spec is equipped when we do this, we say it's no longer equipped. If it is not equipped, we say it's equipped. This is not viable. That's not enough code. We will need a little bit more code than that. It will not break right now because we do not have anything else. We don't have any abilities of multiple types. So you could equip every ability and none of them are going to overlap. Okay. But eventually we will need some sort of like... I have no idea if this is doing anything. We have no visual indication of this. If I just do this, would it actually work though? Current unit button dot stored data. I think this just wants current unit. What is this component doing? Skill equip. Okay, that component isn't doing anything of value. It's just updating this value down here, which I probably won't need long term. So that one doesn't matter. But the menu refresh, I think, may actually update the buttons. I keep hitting the wrong button. Oh no, Unity's just loading in the background. The menu refresh, I think, will update the buttons to actually have an icon indicating whether or not it's equipped or not. So that should be able to tell us whether or not it is actually doing something when I hit a button. Could have debugged and like went through the code line by line to see as well, but I prefer to have the UI working. Okay, all three of those are equipped. Okay. I got those mixed up, but otherwise that's fine. I just want dash on this side. I wrote in west and I want it east, but other than that, that seemed to work. I want to fix that. Ability type extensions. East. So the last thing we need to do here then is we just need to set it up so that if we go to equip an ability and an ability is already equipped of that ability type, we should unequip the old one and re-equip the new one. think long term, I think I want a different screen potentially that's not like just built into this one, but like maybe there's like a screen when you go to start a new run, or like a different like object in this world that you can interact with to choose your abilities. I don't know. I feel like you should be able to get a UI that looks similar to this, and you push B and it like brings up a list of the abilities that can go in there, and you choose one of them to equip, opposed to just like, I'm going to equip all of these things and just like in one giant list. It doesn't feel right. So there's a UI change I think I need there. But now I can do dash attack. Yep, that's doing light. Can I do shove? I can. I'll wait a turn so that I can do a heavy. 22. Perfect. Okay. So those are equipable. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So if I only equip light attack, for example, and then go do a run, yeah, I only have that dash attack. Okay. I mean, that works. Cool. I think that also means I can delete all of these. I don't think anything is using this move one either, because that's the old version. I might... no, I don't need that. End turn is a weird one. Ending a turn is an ability, which maybe is a weird thing I've done. But otherwise, this should also still work. Just testing everything at this point. Trying to make sure that I am not missing something. So we'll equip these two. We'll just do shove and light attack. We'll go on a run. We show up here. We have our two abilities. I'm also going to just double check and see like, hey, where are they? They are here. They are clones. That means they were instantiated. So now we can walk off the edge of the scene. And then this will be technically a new version of the character who was instantiated in between rooms and also has these two clones. Yep. Yeah, so that's all working exactly how I drew it up. Sorry, I was having fun hitting the enemy. All right. That's what I wanted to accomplish today. We are at 3 hours on this stream. I think we're at a good place to call it. Yeah. Yeah, just checking to see if there's anything else going on here, but I think we're in a good spot. We shall leave it here. What do I need to do next? When we get to either off camera or stream, I'm not sure when I'll get another chance to stream, but The next thing I'd like to work on is combos, I think. So I'd like to get it to the point where when we do an attack on an enemy, depending on what ability type it is, it will do basically like a crit effect. And if you do the next ability or the next ability type that would be strong against that enemy, it like crits them again. And so part of like fighting the enemies will be figuring out like, oh, if I do like shove dash, that like causes them to lose turns and do way more damage. And so learning which enemies require which kind of attack patterns or combination of abilities will be part of the combat experience. But I don't have any of that hooked up yet. So I'd like to build in the combo system. Beyond that, we do need to figure out like what exactly each ability you start with is. So do you start with no abilities and you can only do basic punches on the bats to begin with? How many runs until I unlock a new ability? How does unlocking this section work? Is this always available, or does like this unlock after so many runs? There's some aspects of that needs to be figured out. We also need to figure out what each of these skill trees look like in terms of progression. I'm thinking that the first ability you get is probably from the goddess giving it to you, and then each one after is you working your way through the skill tree. I'm also a little concerned about the fact that when we come in here, do a run, and if I debug end us back, or end the run and head back to the goddess screen, when we come back here, the skill screen isn't opening. So there's like general bug fixing that also kind of just needs to be done as well. This UI, I don't know if it should be showing up during this area. Same with like the progress bar for how many turns you have. Oh, it did show up this time. What was causing... Okay, so that's an even worse bug. Potentially it was something that I was doing wrong an hour ago and I wrote bad code, or there's some sort of weird edge case where the skill screen just doesn't show up after a run. Either way, concerning. I think that's enough of a rambly outro. I've enjoyed the stream. Thanks for everyone who's hung out and popped into chat today. Again, no idea when the next stream will be, but you can check Discord. I will try and alert folks when I know when I'll stream again. Ooh. Okay, fun bugs. Sorry, outro. Discord for future streams. We will be continuing to work on game dev stuff. That is the foreseeable future. I'm sorry if that's not something you're interested in, but thank you for checking out my content anyways. For now, though, this is going to be Tolhi signing out. Later, folks.